Today I'll be discussing with you something new, though we've been working on it for a very long time, called Wearable Disposable Brain Stimulation. Please feel free to take images if you want, the relevant conflict is that my university has a patent on this technology. So we're all here as fans of brain stimulation, and I think there's a lot to be excited about, and it's all going to be showcased at this meeting. We're really at the culmination of decades of amazing technological innovation, and this has often been associated with rapid translation in the clinic, and Harold did a great job of summarizing that. However, I think we're all very much also aware that neuromodulation and brain stimulation by far pales in comparison to the adoption and use of drugs, which is most of medicine, right? If we or a loved one goes to a doctor, that doctor is likely going to be prescribing first, second, and third a drug before even thinking about neuromodulation. And so I want to suggest to you today that one way to explain this is not that brain stimulation is less effective or less safe, but rather that this may come down to a large extent to how we distribute brain stimulation, and therefore that's an area where further innovation needs to be directed. So I want to describe the barriers to brain stimulation, and I want to focus on home-based electrotherapy. This would, you would imagine, would be the one with the least possible barriers, and let's see what that user experience might be like. First of all, there's an upfront cost of the durable medical equipment, maybe batteries, maybe a charger cable, and always disposable accessories as well. And all this would have to be carried around with the individual, right, wherever they wanted to use it. At each and every use, they need to configure the device, perhaps connect electrodes, connect wires, program it, set the appropriate intensity, and then after every use there is waste. So there's waste associated with the accessories themselves, but ultimately these durable devices themselves will be thrown out. There's substantial waste associated with all the equipment as well. And there's been wonderful innovation in this space, but I think a lot of it has actually in a sense introduced more complexity to the technology. So I want to suggest to you sort of an alternative vision, one in which individuals would be able to get neuromodulation, perhaps over the counter, perhaps at their pharmacy, packaged by indication, and these would be packaged as individual doses. They would be able to carry these doses in their pocket or in their purse, and then be able to apply it discreetly whenever it was appropriate for them to use it. And so this is really a distribution and use experience that I think feels a lot more like topical medicine or drugs. And so this is the technology that my lab has been working on for over half a decade to try to achieve this vision, wearable disposable brain stimulation. So this is the technology right here. It's about 1 millimeter thin. But there's a lot that's packed into it, and this is a self-contained neuromodulation dose, and I will be explaining to you today how it works. We believe it has applications across brain stimulation, but also in accelerated wound healing using electricity, so electrical band-aids, and also electrically enhanced drug delivery. So you can imagine now you have wearable medicine. So we've been working on this very hard for over half a decade, and the reason is that we set the bar very high as far as the design inputs that we felt that this technology needed to meet. First of all, obviously focusing on the user experience. The vision is that the device is activated upon contact, so there's nothing to connect. There's also no switches, so not just no intensity knob, there's no power switch. You put it on, it discharges by itself, it exhausts itself, and then you take it off. It was very important for us for this technology to be truly disposable, and that means that we restricted ourselves only to materials that are environmentally benign. This is both as far as the materials themselves and the production methods as well, very abundant materials, and we decided that there would be no electronics. So this is neuromodulation. This is controlled electrical stimulation without electronics. All right, and that was very hard. It had to be very cost effective, obviously. So the technology was absolutely dematerialized, and it had to be something that could be scaled, right, at a very large scale. And so we would be relying on established manufacturing methods. And overall, again, the vision was that this would be something that could be distributed like pharmacotherapy. So this is, again, the platform itself. Now, in principle, it's very straightforward. The device itself is a pouch. And inside the pouch are all the active elements that achieve its functionality. The only thing outside of the pouch is the interface. This is like a hydrogel. And then when the pouch is put on the body, the pouch starts to do its job. It discharges the electricity into the body according to a prescribed dose. So in principle, it's very straightforward, but in fact, the technology is incredibly complicated. As I mentioned, the overall device can be about 1 millimeter thick, but at each portion of the device, there could be over a dozen different layers. These include things like the energy sources itself, a variety of interconnects, sealing methods, valves. I'll describe all these components in general, but I want you to imagine that inside this thing is really a very complicated three-dimensional structure, and the functionality of these devices emerges from this three-dimensional structure that had to be designed. As I mentioned also, it was important for us from the beginning to do something that could ultimately be manufactured at scale, so we're relying on conventional additive type manufacturing. So you're starting with a substrate and you're adding on top of it. So this is something that could ultimately be translated into type of like roll-to-roll manufacturing. So you'd be spitting out a lot of these. One of the ways we achieve that is through a process where we manufacture onto a substrate, but that substrate is actually the enclosure of the pouch itself. So we start with a substrate, and we are printing different layers on it. And as we're printing it, we're creating this three-dimensional structure, right? And then at the final stage, we cut out the substrate, and we fold it in onto itself. So all the active ingredients are now inside the pouch. And then we would seal it. And again, the only thing that would go outside the pouch would be the interface component, which is the hydrogel. So at the heart of these devices are batteries. But these are batteries that are not like any batteries that we were ever encountered. Most batteries just are used to provide power. These actually control the discharge as well. So these had to be batteries that were engineered in such a way that they could provide the prescribed dose upon contact. So there were many decisions that had to go into this, the kind of chemistry that we're using, if it could be alkaline chemistry, the amount of materials that we're using, both on the cathode and anode side, the surface contact, and many other decisions as well that had to go into designing these very specialized batteries. Now, each battery only provides about 1.5 volts. This is not enough for most applications that we were looking at, so we had to design these packs to have batteries in series, right? And so in this case, you're seeing a whole bunch of series batteries that are printed onto the pack. Again, this was not trivial. There were a lot of geometrical issues and functional issues that had to be addressed. Each battery is a sealed compartment. This was also a major project for us to imagine how we would actually seal it, finding the appropriate adhesive in order to hold it together. But these batteries also generate gas as part of their operation. And this isn't like a hard can, like a regular battery. So we would have a situation where the pouches would otherwise be expanding and bursting. So we had to design these a system of one-way valves and venting channels. And again, this is at the sub-millimeter scale in order to vent the technology. And again, this is all built into. All these things are being built together. And finally, as I mentioned, the only thing outside of the device is the hydrogel itself. We had to design a novel form of interconnect. These are actually very small channels that go through the enclosure from the terminals of the inside of the device to the hydrogel as well, and that was also novel technology. And finally, we had to think a lot about conformability. These aren't really stretchable per se, but for each application, they had to bend to fit, right? And we have things in there that are, for example, stiff, like the batteries. So we had to think about axis of bending between the batteries themselves, different types of cut patterns, and also how we would shape these per application. And I'll be showing you some applications. And all these issues, combined with all the design inputs, had to be figured in at the same time, and they were all interacting with one another, making it a very complicated process. One of the things that was very challenging and I think very novel was how the devices discharge themselves. This is not a traditional voltage control device, for example, 1 volt or 2 volt. It's not a traditional current control device, such as 1 milliamp and 2 milliamp, but rather you have these batteries that are interacting with the body. And together this determines the discharge. And this is complicated because the battery pack itself is made of all these complicated nonlinear battery chemistries. The body itself is also very complicated. And as you discharge, the characteristics of the battery pack is changing. These batteries are not the same batteries that they were before, but we also know the body impedance changes, right? We don't know what the body impedance is, and it's dynamic on top of it. So both these things are changing in time. And so the question is, how would you then regulate the current when we're not allowed to use electronics, right? You can't just press a 9-volt battery onto your forehead and expect to have any level of regulation. So we came up with a system to a novel theoretical framework in order to support the design of wearable disposable brain stimulation, where we divided up the load, the physiological load and the battery pack into sort of separate elements. We characterized the body separately. We characterized each possible battery pack design separately, and then we developed a novel way to simulate their interactions. And there's a lot of details here, so I would refer you to the preprint that is currently out, but I'll try to walk you through it to give you some intuition how we achieve this. So the first part is we just characterize the load itself. Let's say the goal is to stimulate the arm. Now what we're doing is we're using constant current, so we're pushing constant current using a source meter, and we're measuring the resulting voltage. And you can see that typically over time, the voltage drops, but the amount of voltage that you need will also increase with the amount of current that you see, but you can also see there's some nonlinear behaviors in there as well. So for each application, we characterize the load separately. Then we characterize the battery pack using the same idea where we're using constant current draws and we're measuring the resulting voltage on the battery pack. And so there's many possible battery pack designs that we could use. And so this is simulating them as well. And if you're paying attention, you'll see that though both of these experiments are actually very different, one is a passive system, one is an active system, we in both cases end up with these relationships of current, battery voltage, and time. And so in the final step, what we do is we overlay these two discharge patterns, and we see where they intersect. And we predict that when you put the pouch on the body, what happens is that the pouch's voltage has to be the same as the voltage on the body, right? Because they're connected. And the amount of current coming out of the pouch must be the same as the amount of current going into the body. So those things must be equal. And so by looking at the intersection of these two plots, we were able to predict the discharge trajectory of these devices. And this was very important to us when there are literally 1,000 design decisions we need to make. We cannot build 1,000 different designs. We have to have a theoretical framework to support the process. So now let me walk you through 3 applications of how we customize these devices. One is a TDCS or cranial stimulation type application. One is drug delivery, and one is accelerated wound healing. In each case, we always start with the core design inputs, which is the dose. Right? None of these are new technologies. I mean, these have been around for decades. So what we're always trying to do is we're always trying to mimic the performance of existing benchtop devices, right? Because if they work, we will work, right? It's just a different platform. So obviously with TDCS, you might be talking about a few milliamps for tens of minutes. For iontophoresis, it's really a charge-dependent type of dosing, but we would switch now to saline sponges because they need to have the drug saturated in them. And then another application would be accelerated wound healing. Notice there's a big difference in current, electro size as well, and so that's why these are different devices. So these are what the devices actually look like. You can see right away they are built very differently. I can walk you through them. So in the case of the TDCS device, which is right here, and I'll talk to you more about that. This is 4 cells. So these are 4 cells, meaning there are 4 batteries, but these batteries are actually not the same. Each battery is designed to play a different role related to the ramp up, the maintenance, and the termination. The battery component is more rigid, but where you would be making contact with the scalp, you have additional flexibility. In the case of the iontophoretic device, again, this is really designed to regulate the amount of charge, so regulating the amount of charge to drug delivery, and you would have a drug pouch, and you could put a variety of substances in there, right, from pain medication to Botox to vaccines, and that would be transdermally facilitated delivery. The wound healing one, I want you to imagine that you have now a wound, and the device has three components. The central one is sort of a conventional cloth that would go over the wound, and then the hydrogels go to either side, right? And the hydrogels, they serve two functions. They serve the function of the traditional adhesive, right, in the bandage that they hold it down, but they're also where the current is being passed through. So the current is being passed from one hydrogel to the other in order to facilitate the stimulation, and this is sort of what a device like that, if you can see it, would look like. We used different forms of computational modeling. I already described why we need some sort of new thinking about how these models are designed. And then we validate the output. And the most important thing for us to validate is the dose coming out. Because again, we're not trying to create new technology. We're simply trying to mimic existing technology and emulate their dose. And our hypothesis that if we can emulate the dose, we can emulate the efficacy. Let me show you some results using the electrical Band-Aid. This is a rodent model. So this is, what I like about the Band-Aid is actually the form factor for the rodent is actually very close to the form factor that you would use in a person. This is a puncture wound on the back. It would be either, in this case, you're seeing two 8mm punctures. It could also be a single 1 centimeter puncture. And the device is placed on the rodent, and then it starts to discharge by itself. And this is what that discharge looks like. You see we have a target of around 200, 300 microamps that needs to be maintained for about 2 hours. So this is a single dose, and then the device, the Band-Aid, exhausts itself, right? You could leave it on, or if you want to, you could take it off. And this is an example just from 2 animals of what a typical healing pattern would look like. In the top, you see a sham or a regular Band-Aid, let's say, so there's no electricity. In the bottom, you see an active or electrical Band-Aid, and this is something obviously that has been now reproduced across multiple animals, but I think you could even see by eye that the electrical Band-Aid is leading to a accelerated rate of wound healing. There's other ways to quantify this as well. I think you might also notice that in the lower trace, it's healing in a sort of angular way. That's actually related to how the current is flowing as well. And so we've now, and again, electrical wound healing is not new. But doing it in this kind of form factor, I think, is... all right, well, let me talk finally about wearable TDCS. So this is the device itself that could be placed on the head. There's 2 doses we've been looking at. One is a conventional dose of about 2.5 milliamp, but we've also been looking at a higher dose of 5 milliamp that I'll talk about. As with all wearable disposable devices, it needs to be activated on contact. That means we need an automatic ramp up, no electronics, right? This is being controlled by the chemistry of the batteries itself. A current regulated at a certain level, despite the fact that different people have different impedances. Okay, so the batteries know how to do that, and then the batteries are designed to fail, right, after about 30 minutes in a controlled way. Now the montage, because we're using a hydrogel, is actually below the hairline. So these are high capacity hydrogel electrodes in this sort of slightly lower bitemporal montage. I want to really emphasize again that we are regulating this without electronics, right? This is really what makes this system so hard. So you have the individual, and then the device is placed on the head, and that in itself starts the therapy, right? And so that's why current is flowing through it. We also need to validate that this is the case. Because the device has no electronics, we use an external device, right? So we'll use an external device to record the voltage of the current. There's no electronics here in itself that would allow us to report it. And as I mentioned, we're looking in this case for 2 target currents. This is the performance across several individuals. You can see that is sort of our operating range. Now that you'll see that the current is not perfectly even or perfectly consistent, that is correct. With this technology, we need to be comfortable that we're not going to get the same precision that you're going to get with a benchtop electronics device, but it is within the operating range. It's self-terminating. You can see that the device's battery pack voltage is actually adjusting itself per design in order to try to maintain the appropriate current. And I think this type of performance will only get better as we develop better and better chemistries. And again, I'm emphasizing here that there is a high current version. I want to say a few words about that because I think this is very important. So thinking about high capacity TDCS, This device itself doesn't just include the battery packs, but it includes these novel electrodes that we're designing, that we're calling them high-capacity electrodes, because they can pass a tremendous amount of charge in a tolerated way. And so that's what you're seeing here on the ends, right? Battery pack in the middle, high-capacity electrodes at the end. You could also use these high-capacity electrodes as standalone electrodes and just connect them to an external stimulator, right? So I'm just focusing on the performance of the electrodes themselves, regardless of whether we energize them with a wearable device or a benchtop device. And so those are the electrodes right here. And these are just some of the results when we're looking at tolerability. So this is classical self-reported VAS pain. You can see this is the average scores across individuals for 2 milliamp and 5 milliamp. I want to emphasize this is out of 100, right? And so by the end of the session at around 30 minutes, majority of subjects are below perception. So we're not talking about pain. We're talking about, borderline perception, the usual stuff, the tingling, the itching, and the redness, that will all resolve by itself shortly after stimulation goes. And so why would you want to go to, higher currents? Well, I mean, the obvious reason is as you go to higher currents, you're going to get more current in the brain. And that is represented in these computational simulations that show the electric field in the brain. First, you can look at the conventional F3, F4 montage with 2 milliamps. Next to it, you can see this bitemporal montage at 2 milliamps. We get a little bit more current just because it's a little bit lower on the head as a result of the physics of it. But then when you go to 5 milliamps, and these are slightly different scales, but you get the idea, you get a lot more current and a lot more current everywhere, right? And of course, it's going to be a trial-by-trial, case-by-case decision how much current you want to use. The point I want to make is that decision is no longer dependent on tolerability. We've gone to 5 milliamp, it's tolerable. We've gone to 6 milliamp, it's tolerable. We're going to keep going up and up, and we expect that we're going to be able to maintain tolerability at least up to 10 milliamps, and not just with the first generation high capacity electrodes. So now we have the ability, the offer is there, right, to go to higher currents. And I think that is important, very important for the field to consider. So I just want to sort of start to wrap up by talking about sort of the overall experience, the user experience of conventional TDCS versus wearable TDCS. So in conventional TDCS, obviously we have the conventional durable equipment. With conventional TDCS, you always have accessories. I want to emphasize, we're not introducing accessories here. Right? There always were accessories. There always were disposables, right? Only you'd have disposables and wires and so on. You'd have to set it up every time, make sure you place it on the head correctly. Maybe there's a controller, maybe there's an app, and there's always an associated waste, not just of the accessories, but of the device itself. So if you really think about the amount of weight and the batteries associated with the device, it is a significant amount of waste over the lifetime of the device. In contrast, if we think about a wearable, disposable TDCS user experience, again, you would be, I imagine when people get it, it's not even electrical stimulation. It's just medicine, right? And it just happens to be medicine that comes in a sticker format. You would get the, per indication, the appropriate device. You can transport it however you want. There's no electronics in it. You can put this in an MRI if you wanted to. There's none of those concerns. Then a single dose would be removed from its pouch, placed on the head, auto-discharged, and then would simply be disposed at the end. So what have we achieved with wearable disposable electrotherapy? There is no electronics, and yet there's a technology that's capable of ramping up, hitting target levels, and then decreasing it, and those could be different target levels and different durations, and this comes in a single dose, single-use form factor, right? So you apply it and you use it, and just because of this, we believe that there's now the opportunity for this to be distributed more like drugs, more like topical creams. I haven't fully had a chance to describe all the different applications, but there is, for example, a version that you might use for cranial nerve stimulation that's currently done for migraines, TENS. So instead of a TENS device, it's now just a TENS Band-Aid, and so on. And I think all these platforms are possible, facilitated by the fact that we just have a different user experience than you would ever get with a bench-top device that requires, charging, and it's not charged, I have to recharge it, why is my app not connecting to it, and so on. Not that those approaches are not very valuable in their own right. And also very important to us was from the beginning, and this is partially why this took us over 5 years to do, is that this had to be ultra low cost using environmentally benign technology. So if you'd like to hear more about this, we do have a poster this afternoon that also describes this high capacity TDCS. We have the high capacity electrodes here, though I don't think we're going to be stimulating people at the poster, but you can certainly see it. There's an on-demand presentation tomorrow. This is a link to the preprint, and I'll be posting the slides and everything else to social media, but they're also available through the conference app. So thank you for your attention.
Wow, wow, wow. I can go home now. I usually I love these meetings because I always leave with something that's blown my mind that I knew nothing about. And here it is, first lecture, and I'm done. Thank you. We've got a few minutes for some questions. Please come to the microphones if you do, announce who you are, and then state your question. I'll just ask one. So I used the term electroceutical, which I noticed you didn't use. Is there something different? Does electroceutical cover this, or is it different in some way?
Right. So I think the term electroceutical became popular and then somehow it became dispopular. Maybe there was some commercial proprietary reason why people start using the term. So I guess you could call this wearable disposable electroceuticals. You could call it wearable disposable brain stimulation, wearable disposable, you say you can call it whatever you want as long as you call it, right?
All right. Do you want to pick out?
Please, yeah.
Thanks, Marom, for that wonderful talk. My name is Mark Macaulay. I'm from Swinburne University in Melbourne. You talked about the user experience, and you've described things that sound reasonable, but how have you actually tested that user experience?
Right. So that's an excellent question, and I should say that our testing of user experience has currently been limited to healthy, subject volunteers in my lab. I think if you really wanted to deploy something, let's say over the counter, there's much more rigorous standards that you could use, for example, that the US FDA sets to make sure that people understand how to dose themselves and are able to do it. So we haven't done those, but I feel confident that people know how to use Band-Aids. So I feel confident that people do all kinds of things. I should mention also as far as so related to that is also safety, right? What is the potential for abuse? So again, this technology is designed not to over discharge. There's only one discharge in it. The chemistry we're using, the materials in it, it's borderline edible. I wouldn't eat it, but it's borderline that. So we've done everything we can to make it safe in order to prevent that discharge. If you take it on and off and on and off, you don't get any of those transient shocks. So a lot of engineering to try to at least prevent misuse.
Thanks.
Can I jump in? So you were using kind of constant TDCS-like approaches. Is there any way that you could make it cycle and do something like TACS?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So if you notice the 3 applications that I focused on were specifically direct current. So these are situations where we already are using direct current, so it seems very natural to use the Band-Aid as well. In order to make a oscillating device, we would need additional technology. Now there is printable technology like OFETs that can generate the oscillations. You could also use a very small amount of electronics, right? And so there are things that we are already using like those RFID tags, right? So there are electronics that are already almost at that disposable level that we could adopt in. So that is certainly, that's sort of, I would say that when I think about this as a platform, I just think of it as something that has many iterations of innovation. And so what I'm showing today is maybe just version 1, and I'm hoping that from my lab and other labs, we will see things like oscillations and then ultimately pulse control all built in.
Thank you, Dr. Bikson. This is really exciting. I'm Sangeeta Madhavan from University of Illinois, Chicago. I've been using TDCS for the last 10 years, and we honestly use the very basic model that you can get under $200, like that was available 10 years back. So this is exciting to see how technology has advanced really fast. But then the efficacy of TDCS showing that, at least efficacy has not advanced that, or it doesn't seem to match the advancing technology. So how can we, in light of this uncertainty, how can we, I guess I'm asking, move on to these designs without actually testing them fully?
Yeah. I really appreciate that question and the opportunity to address this audience about that. So there's been a lot of work on TDCS. There have been some negative trials, but there's also been very positive trials. There have been large randomized controlled trials, extremely rigorous, showing efficacy for various indications. So I think from a big picture perspective, when we're looking at any neuromodulation technology, we need to realize that it's not all the same, right? TMS is not one thing, ECT is not one thing, and certainly with, as you know, of course, TDCS is not one thing, and so maybe we saw a less exciting result here, but a more exciting result here. We need to ask what was different in those cases, and so I think so. There's a premise there that you know. There's people in this room who know a lot more about this than me, but there is a sense that TDCS has proven effective, even off-label for many individuals directly. Having said that, I think the fact that we have been stuck at low currents is unusual. TMS is no longer done at 1,000 pulses per day. It's just not. You know what I mean? People understood very quickly that there's value to accelerating and adapting dose. And for TDCS, for some reason, the field has been a little bit slow, right? So the technology has gone in many ways many more sophisticated, but we're still seeing 1 milliamp, 2 milliamp. And I'm not saying that all trials moving forward now need to be at 5 milliamp or 7 milliamp or 10 milliamp. I'm just saying that tolerability is no longer the reason, right, to throttle it for that reason. So that's what I mean. It's more like an offering. It's there. It'd be up to individuals like you to decide when it's appropriate or not to use it.
Thank you, and I'm all for TDCS, but just wanted to get your thoughts. Thank you.
Very good. I think that my name is Xiaochu Zhang. I come from the China University of Science and Technology of China. I have two questions. The first one is I just noted the wearable TDCS is only used in the prefrontal areas and can that used before the other area, for example, the parental or occipital, because the hair is covered. Has some not only the skin, is some hair on side. The second question is there some HD TDS, the hand density TDCS, for example, the multiple electrodes, not only 2 electrodes? These are 2 questions. Thank you.
So it's an excellent question. So the current technology is self-adhesive hydrogel based, because the vision was that you would be able to take it out and just could have stick it on and then it would discharge on its own. Because of that, we did move below the hairline. However, what I tried to show with the computational modeling is in our sort of new montage, we can hit many of the regions that are of interest for many indications, such as anxiety and depression. But you're correct that the current version of the technology wouldn't be able to go in the hairline, and I'm not quite sure how to do that without adding, let's say, a headgear, but now you've added an additional component. And you're also correct in identifying that, you know, the TDCS I showed is only 2 channels. You can easily make multi-channel. This device actually here has 3 electrodes on it, using 2 different channels. So you can make multi-channel approaches, but again, not on the hair. Yeah.
Yes, not here, but for the HD TDCS is you should control each channel's the current. If only the cutoff that you cannot, I know how to control each kind of. For example, one is 1 millisecond, another is 2. Just.
It's an excellent point. So you might have, let's say you have 2 pairs of electrodes. Each one would be associated with its own battery pack, and each battery pack would be designed to provide a regulated amount of current. So let's say you wanted to deliver 2 milliamp to one pair, 2 milliamp to the other pair. Those would be facilitated by independent battery packs. So in principle, I think it can be done.
Okay, thank you.
One more question.
Hello, my name is Lily Dipnell and I'm from Deakin University in Melbourne, Australia. I was wondering if you could shed some more light on the end-of-life management of the product, especially around bioavailability of the materials and any recycling or biodegradability. Thank you.
Right. And so again, there's a lot, when we're looking at the type of materials that we're using, obviously there's a lot of literature already available, right, on what would be environmentally benign and to what extent. I should mention that almost the entire material of this device currently is the packaging, right? So that's, when we're talking about materials, it's the packaging. The batteries themselves, right? In many cases, we're talking about milligram or sub-milligram levels of material, because whereas regular batteries are always designed to last as long as possible and not regulate themselves, this is really the opposite. These are batteries that are designed to have a very short lifetime, extremely short. And so as a result of that, we're using a lot less active materials than you might normally use. I mean, nothing is perfectly green, right? But again, I want to emphasize traditional TDCS and all non-invasive electrical stimulation has accessories as well. And the amount of material, our entire material mass, right, is not more than the mass of just the accessories that they're using. And if those accessories, for example, have a metal pin on them, just a single metal pin, they have more metal than we do. So it's not, I don't want to say it's not perfect, but it does not increase. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, thank you. It's really interesting, and it'll be interesting to see how it's handled with the single-use products as well across periods of time. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Marom.